event for this year, actually. We've been out for a little while, but we're back now. And I would like to start with asking everyone to be aware of others, be friendly and patient in the meeting, open to all questions and understanding of differences, and also be kind and considerate to others. I would first like to have your attention for the next event. That's in 1 month. So the 5th of May, we will have Tracy Bogiano talking about mental health and wellness in IT. It's a very popular topic, of course, in these times. And I think it will be a great topic to learn from, because well, I for myself am also struggling the last year. So well, it's good to have some tips and tricks from Tracy about that. So today we have 2 great speakers. Arno Coppens will kick off, and around 9 p.m., so in an hour, Kurt Buller will also have a presentation on adoption of Power BI. But first, Arno Coppens will talk about best practices and how to implement Power BI like a pro. And he will have some tips and tricks and best practices. A little bit about Arno. He started in social sciences, actually, and later jumped in the IT world at OGD ICT-diensten, where he now works as a data architect and BI consultant. And he will be talking about how to use Power BI like a pro. So take it away.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my screen. There we go, and I will start the presentation. So yes, Power BI like a pro. Down there at the bottom is my own Twitter handle, and in the upper right-hand corner is the Twitter handle for Power BI Days and the hashtag. Power BI like a pro, what does that mean? Well, Microsoft's stated intention is, or one of its intentions with Power BI is to empower everyone to, with the tools to be a data hero. This slide, actually, well, not the slide, but the picture and the text are taken right from the website of Microsoft, where Simon O says it's really quick for someone with no or little experience or technical background to pick up the tools and start creating things, which changes how they do their own job, which is true. You see this actually with a lot of the low-code efforts. You see this with Power Platform as well. It really lowers the barriers to entry to get started with things, which is great. On the other hand, there are actually some pitfalls, and some of the things that the more professional sort of users and developers do or would like to do that are equally useful for those who just start out or who are doing it sort of on the side. They're not necessarily evident. So that's what I want to talk about in this presentation. The plan for this hour, I see that I forgot to update this slide, but okay. So first I'll introduce myself a bit, who's who, and I'll detail who I think the target audience for this story is. Based on my experiences from data mines, I think we might be a little already sort of too knowledgeable, the people who come here, but so we might speed through some parts. But we're going to see. And then, of course, you can also give the recording really to other people later on who might fit the target audience. Then I'll describe my case. What do I mean with Power BI like a pro? I have actually an example case, and then I will go, after I go through what I mean, I will also just explain why I think anyone should want this. This bit has actually been updated since the data mine session. The third part is mainly just the background and the building blocks of Power BI, with a specific focus on the service and the Power BI desktop, and sort of ignoring slightly the paginated reports. I've shuffled it around so that now after each, so the fourth part is about the options, the solutions that we have for the various problems that I'll detail. And rather than having a separate demo section at the end, I've decided to shuffle it around and for each solution, present the solution and then do a short demo and then move on to the next one. And at the end, there's room for questions. So one of the other things I noticed was that I get distracted by keeping an eye on the chat and having fun with the people in the chat. So please keep your questions till the end. I don't know if Nikki or Mark can maybe sort of collect them a little bit, and then we can go through them at the end.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, and then those are actually the official sections of this slide deck, and then all the way at the end there is a final slide where I've collected some useful links to useful blogs and useful communities if you're just starting out with Power BI, and which have also helped me put together this this story. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Let's move on. Who's who? Who am I? As you can clearly see, this is me, courtesy of a colleague of mine. I've worked at OGD since 2015, and as Nikki said, I was a policymaker in a previous life. Did social sciences at university, and got into IT, and then from there on, I went into BI and doing data stuff. Who am I when I'm not at work? I am a enthusiastic follower of various communities. I also always liked going to the actual physical events and sort of drumming up my colleagues to come with me to, you know, Data Saturday and Power BI user group events and data mines. And I'm still doing that, but mostly virtually last year, including also, of course, the Benny's events, which actually sort of got me into my presentation last month at Data Mines. Also, I do other stuff that's not actually related to my work. I always like tinkering around and seeing if I can make things better, or at least the way I want them to be. I discovered this week that I can actually hack my car, unlock some features that are that the previous owner didn't purchase. It's kind of cool. Just hope I don't brick it, because it's not a problem with a phone, but not sure how I'm gonna pick up my car if I brick it. Anyway, and then next to that, I love going hiking with my wife and our cats. And the picture, my mom is also with us in Sweden. There is a cat in the backpack, but one of the cats, the one I had there, usually just prefers to sleep in the backpack rather than walk, because there's humans for walking. So, who are you? The person I had in mind for this presentation is, I've sort of phrased it as a doer of things and an aspiring, maybe citizen developer. And in general, that really just means working with Power BI or even just with data isn't your primary, sort of your core business during the day. Could really be doing anything, maybe in HR or in finance, or really doesn't matter. And you just want to do something with data, or someone's told you, hey, you're it. You're going to do our data stuff from now on. So get started. So that's sort of the person that I'm focusing the story on, and it could also include sort of developers, the Power BI developers that are really just starting out. So I don't really assume or presume any prior knowledge, other than knowing what Power BI is, and what you can broadly use it for. So it's fine if you're just joining the party like she is. This was quite a lucky coincidence that Microsoft had these stock photos with exactly the Power BI colors. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence, but anyway. What do you have? Like I said, I don't assume any prior knowledge, so it's okay if you've not got anything yet, or maybe you've been going at it for a while and you're just sort of realizing that things are starting to get messy and I don't know, you don't know how to get out of it or whatever, or you just have a bunch of Power BI reports and you want to have a look at sort of improving them. That's also fine. In that case, you might already know some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. So, what's my case? What's my story? And why do I think I'm right? So, what's the scenario? What's a pro developer workflow? And why would you or anyone want one? So, let's assume, given the background that I gave, you're a doer of things and an aspiring citizen developer, or maybe not citizen. I forget why they say citizen. Sounds very like all of us are in the military or something. We're not, but who can help you get a good workflow? So these are the assumptions of my case. You are the Power BI user for your department, and all their Power BI belong to you. If people are happy with your work, then other departments will also know where to find you, because that's always how it goes. If people hear that you're doing something well, then they'll come to you to do it for them as well. You build it, you maintain it. It's not like you can just build it and then hand it off to someone else. So you have a vested interest in building it right so that it's properly maintainable. Budgets are tight, so you're largely on your own. This could be just because budgets are tight in general, or due to COVID, or because you're a small organization. In fact, probably in a bigger organization, there are going to be more people who are also using Power BI. You might even have actually a proper BI team or department that does some of this work, or you might have the budget to hire consultants. But in this case, for whatever reason, you can't. The budgets aren't there, so you can't be hiring expensive consultants, and there is no BI team. So you're on your own, maybe with the help of a few colleagues. Having said that, and you're now you need to get some help to get up and running, and ideally get things right, because if you can avoid making a mess the first time around, then that's obviously better for you. Not just because people will be happier, but also because it's just really better for you, because it's really frustrating if you have to maintain a messy environment. And in the end, the quality also tends to suffer from it. So two names keep coming up whenever you talk to people about these things. That's Babs and James. So let's introduce Babs and James. We have Babs. She's very friendly, and we're not exactly sure what her role is in the organization, but she does something with computers, might be IT. And she's very friendly, which is always nice. And she has about 3 years of Power BI experience. And altogether, her portfolio consists of about 8 data sets and 32 reports that she is responsible for. So, yeah, she could be helping you to get started. You're not completely on your own. And then there's James. James is in the finance department, which is, if you're going to look for someone who's good with, Excel and these days Power BI, the odds are fair that you're going to find someone. I don't know if they're necessarily good, but you're going to find someone with knowledge of the tooling in the finance department, because they're always busy with numbers and data. James is also very helpful. He has about 4 years of Power BI experience, and he has a reputation as the go-to fixer, Power BI fixer in the department. And his portfolio consists of about 40 odd reports and data sets with various versions of various files that are used for, various teams, because not everyone can get the same data. And yeah. So what I quickly want to do, see if this works. Where is the meeting? It's the meeting. I'm gonna quickly do a show of hands. I'll put the two names in the chat, and James 1 and Babs 1. Okay, and I just want to know from you guys who you would actually ask for help at this point, given the background that I've just given. Yeah. Just give a like or a love to either James or Babs, depending on who you think you would ask at this point for help. How many people are we in the meeting?
Around 25, 26.
Okay. Let's see. I think we're just over half. I don't know how many other guests we have, because someone says that he can't vote as a guest. So I think we have a clear winner at this point. 11 people like Babs, 3 love her, and at least one person loves James. Can we see who loves? And an extra vote for Babs. So this is interesting, and I think good, better than I would hope, that because this suggests that we actually, even if we can't explicitly sort of define what we mean by a proper developer workflow, apparently we are able at least to recognize a good one when we see one. So that's interesting. I will now go into what I think a proper developer workflow is. I would actually be quite interested in hearing how you would all define one, but I think I need to think of another way to gather that from people for next time. Oh yeah. Focus to the meeting, to the presentation. Yeah. So what do I mean with a pro or developer workflow? To my mind, that consists of 3 parts in no particular order. Version control, which means knowing what changes between one version of your report or your data set, or really any artifact that you're making, what changes from one version to the next, and the ability to upgrade from an older version to a newer version, or roll back in case there is some reason to do so. If it turns out that you miss something and it's not good and you want to revert to the previous version. Then there's source control, which is, in a nutshell, knowing how things get into production. Production being the environment where everyone consumes your content. I do think, I'm guessing probably a lot of the citizen developers are really only using one environment. There's only production, or maybe they're keeping sort of Power BI, PBIX files locally until they feel that they're good enough and then pushing them. So source control means knowing what's the process by which things get into production. Are there any checks, any validations, that sort of thing? And the last one, but definitely not the least one, is maintainability, which consists of 2 sub-points: reuse, reduce, and recycle. And mainly the first 2 of those 3. Reuse means focus on reusing code. Don't duplicate code unless you absolutely have to. And this doesn't mean that you can't sort of deploy it multiple times. That's okay if you've got the process automated. Otherwise, it's not okay. But really try to keep all your logic in one place, so that if you Actually, then I'm already getting to the second point, so I'll wait a minute for that. The second point, reduce. This sort of happens automatically when you start reusing code, because your total volume of code will actually shrink, with the exception, of course, when you add new stuff, because then that'll grow your volume. But as you sort of split up bits of code and reuse them, the total amount stays maintainable. And the recycle bit, well, that's mainly because that's the slogan: reuse, reduce, recycle. In this scope, it's not really that relevant, or you could also always recycle all the code if you find it to be relevant. The second point of maintainability is build once, break everywhere, fix once. The more famous version of this expression is build once, deploy anywhere. Like I said, it's okay if you deploy the code multiple times, if you've got the process automated. And my take on this is build once, break everywhere, fix once. Why? Because if I reuse my code and centralize it, if I break it, it's going to break everywhere, which sounds bad. It's probably not going to be fun if it does happen. But the good thing is you only need to fix it once, because it broke in one spot, and that's the spot that everything looks at. Rather than having multiple versions of the code, which some might break, some might not, and the ones that do break might break in different ways due to different interactions with different other bits and pieces, which seems like a better situation at first, maybe because not everything is broken. But it gets really annoying really quickly, because basically everything that did break, you need to go through it almost one by one to diagnose what exactly is breaking. And in the long run, as your environment grows, that really does not scale, and means a lot of manual labor for you, which is not fun. So that's what I mean with a pro or developer workflow. Then let's have a quick look at what that means in the context of Power BI. The good thing is empowering and engaging people with their data means that there's more recognition of the importance of their data, the problems that they might have in their data, the potential that there might be if those problems were solved, or also the negative potential. Maybe if you lose your data, or if you make the wrong business decision because the data, you made the right call based on the data, but the data wasn't right, so the decision is still wrong anyway. And sort of from those three elements, the value that their data actually has. If you put people behind the steering wheel of their own data, then they become engaged. It's no longer sort of your data and your problem. It's their data and their problem and their process. And I think that's great. In terms of Power BI specifically, I'll just now be addressing the bad and the ugly. But before we get there, the Power BI team has been quite relentless over the years in pushing updates. So I think time will solve most problems, because there's updates more than every month, and they're not always updates that I'm interested in. But I'm pretty sure there are always updates that someone's interested in, and a lot of them tend to lay the groundwork for really bigger steps later on. So that's really good. And I, through my critiques that I'm giving here, I do also want to sort of give credit where it's due. The bad, you do, in my mind, run a risk of going from Excel hell to Power BI purgatory. I don't know if everyone here knows what I mean by Excel hell, but it's a typical situation that you tended to have, and still tend to have in a lot of organizations, where lots and lots of people are steering and deciding and working off their own Excel sheets with their own logic, and the truth their own versions of the truth rather than sort of a company-wide version of the truth. And that's problematic. I mean, if you have a management team that has to make decisions and all of the people at the lower levels are using different numbers, then that's really problematic. Power BI doesn't, I mean, it can, but it doesn't necessarily solve that problem. Mostly because in the end, it's always about humans and how you use stuff. That's where the problem tends to be. But you run the risk of moving into Power BI purgatory rather than having an Excel hell with, countless Excel sheets. Power BI purgatory really consists of countless Power BI reports and data sets all over the place, built by anyone and everyone with all of their own versions of the truth that are not necessarily reconcilable with each other. And this is partially, to my mind, because Power BI Desktop doesn't necessarily encourage or discourage. I mean, it sort of encourages bad habits, or at the very least, it doesn't discourage them by design. I mean, in the sense that the way Power BI Desktop is designed, I think. So the ugly is there are actually ways to do this right for a lot of the things, even if they're not sort of the ultimate desirable solution that you might want. But there are actually quite a lot of options. They're just not necessarily evident from, for instance, the interface or whatever, or intuitive. So there's that. Then I was going to do a quick show of hands. Actually, we can just do it anyway. See if James 2 and Babs 2. Based on what I've said so far, does anyone? Well, you can vote again if you want. See if we get different results. I think to relate this to James and Babs, obviously the right solution or the right person to ask, in my mind, was Babs, and I think we all. Well, why? Because as you can see, James has 40 odd reports and data sets. So there's a data set for every report. And then there's actually various versions of various files, which sounds really quite impressive. In some ways it is, but it's completely unmaintainable. Whereas Babs has only 8 data sets that she needs to maintain, and then she's built 32 reports around them, which is way more maintainable. Yes, if on average that's like 4 reports per data set. So if something breaks in one data set, then 4 reports are going to be broken, but she only needs to fix the one data set to fix all 4 of the reports. So going back, everyone is still mainly sticking with James, which is as expected. I'm just gonna minimize the meeting again so I don't get distracted. Yeah. So with that in mind, let's have a look at some background about Power BI, the building blocks of Power BI, and then move on to the next section where we have a look at the solutions that are available to us. This is the section where I've assumed no prior knowledge really of Power BI, so I'm not going to stick on this slide too long. I think you can come back to it. It details which most of the artifacts, they're not all there. I didn't include, for instance, paginated reports, but it gives a general overview. And the idea is that the deployment pipelines that Power BI has, they sort of manage workspaces, except they don't manage data flows yet. Let's see, this is actually a link to the blog post where Microsoft announced that this support is coming, so that's great. And a workspace is basically a bucket in which you can put dashboards and data sets and reports and data flows, and from which you can publish an app by which you make certain dashboards and reports accessible to consumers, and the data sets below them are sort of, the data in it is made accessible through the dashboards and reports, and you can nowadays give a build permission as well, that maybe people can actually build their own content against these data sets. So then their reports will not be in the same workspace, but they can still use that data set. And a thank you to Mark for collecting all the official Power BI icons on his GitHub page. I found them after my previous session, so I added them because I thought they were pretty. And of course, once you do that, then you do that more often. So the main thing I want to focus on here are actually the data sets and the reports, because as you can see, all the other artifacts are only online, and some of them have APIs for them. I think the APIs are, for this audience, not necessarily that interesting. The links are there in the right-hand column if you're interested to know more. But the artifacts that you're going to be building offline locally are data sets and reports, and this also includes paginated reports. But for the context of this session, I'll just be showing the regular Power BI reports. So we have two components. We have a report and a data set. And actually, when you build a PBIX file, you're making both. This is also quite evident in the layout of Power BI Desktop. I actually have Power BI Desktop open. So this is where you create your report based on the data set that you have to the right here, and then here you have the Power Query editor where you can actually. I just wanted to make a small data set by hand quickly for the demo. This is where you build your data set. So you're actually sort of, without really, it's kind of clear from the fact that there are sort of two interfaces, except that they're not really. You're building both a report for the most part and a report and a data set when you're building a PBIX file. So when you dive deep into a PBIX file, you can actually see this. In the background here, I've unzipped a PBIX file. And because a PBIX file in the end is just a zip file with content in it. And what you see here is that there's a data model folder, a file that contains the actual data model, including the compressed data that you have in there from your refreshes that you've done. And then there's a folder called report at the top. And in the report folder, there's a layout file which actually contains the complete structure of your report. So at this point, they're actually also kind of two separate parts of the PBIX file. And this again becomes visible when you push it to the surface, because once you push it to the surface, it gets split up into a separate data set on the one hand and a report on the other. On the other hand, and yet Power BI Desktop does sort of by default lead you to kind of build both these elements in one file, which is really annoying, because this is how you get into James's situation, where you have 40 reports with 40 data sets. It doesn't have to be that way. There are actually solutions for this, but and they're kind of becoming more intuitive. But I do think the workflow that Power BI Desktop encourages doesn't make this too evident. So let's have a look at how we can solve this problem as well as the other versioning and source control problems that we have. The first thing we'll look at is functional separation. And by this, I mean basically the situation that we just described: keep them separate, create separate PBIX files for datasets and for reports. You can't create a dataset file only. A dataset file will always contain, or a PBIX for a dataset will always contain a blank sheet at this point. So a blank report section, basically. But that's okay. You can delete it once you've uploaded it to the service, or just leave it there. It doesn't really matter. Or you could use it to document some things about the dataset. And then you can use separate PBIX files. The PBIX files that you connect to an online Power BI dataset, a dataset that's already been published, they actually don't contain a data model file like the one like I showed in the picture before. They actually just contain a connection file that sort of describes to which dataset it's connected. So to my mind, what you would want to do most of the time is publish your datasets and then build your reports against them as thin reports that are that don't contain any data in themselves. Now, there are going to be situations where you're actually sort of developing them at the same time, where you want to add new feature. In general, I would say do them separately, update your dataset, then go back and update your report. But if you really want to do them at the same time, there are even also ways with the HotSwap external tool nowadays to actually have the dataset open locally as a PBIX file and have a report open as a PBIX file and connect the report, rebind the report to the local file, and then do your work. And then once you've published the dataset, you can switch the connection over to just the online Power BI dataset, and that works as well. The main advantage of this is that you get way better maintainability and scalability, because you have just all your business logic and your measures and your calculations and your transformations are contained in these separate data sets, and they are consistent across all the reports that that consume these data sets. So yeah, which is the why portion at the bottom. You're reusing the transformation logic, and you're reducing the total number of data models or versions of data models that you're maintaining. And if anything breaks, yes, it's going to break everywhere, but you only need to fix it in the one place where it broke, and everything is back up and running. And then we're going to have a little demo. I will switch to Power BI Desktop. So this is a test data set with a report. Just going to close that. Quickly open Power BI Desktop again. Always a surprise on which screen. It's going to start there. I think while we wait, we can maybe take one or two questions if we have any at this point.
No questions okay. At this time. No.
So at this point, I have a blank report, and rather than actually, using the get data experience and start getting data from wherever or manually entering data, I could actually say, well, okay, I do have to use the get data experience, but rather than actually going directly to all sorts of sources to start building a report, I can simply say, hey, I would actually like to use a data set that already exists. And then, of course, I'm just gonna go COVID. There we go. This is an old data set that I uploaded a while ago for an internal version of this session. And now I can, let's see what we have. Click, make it a bit wider. Do we want to know anything interesting? We can just have a bunch of dates and the new cases per million. Oh, there you go. So as you can see, all the data is there. Nowadays, I can also actually see the structure of the data set, which in this case isn't really interesting because there's only one table. But used to be that you couldn't actually see the structure of the data set and the relations, which of course in Power BI is really important because the behavior of your measures and your reports and your interactions are driven by the relations in the model. But that's okay now, you can see those if you have them. If I now go and save this file, demo. We can actually quickly unzip it. Do I have it open? Yes, there we go. Zip. As you can see, the data model file that we saw beforehand, it's not there. It's just contains a small connections file that maintains the connection to the data set that we've used. That you can see. Oh, yeah, we don't need the release notes. That you can see here. So that's the one thing. And here in the report folder, you can actually see the layout file, which is really small because we only have one section. It's all unserialized JSON. I'm not gonna sort of dig into it too deep, but somewhere here should be. I think we used new cases. Yeah, here you can see one of the axes probably of the graphic that was in there. So this is what we call a thin report. And as you can see, compared to a test data set that actually even the test data set that I had beforehand, which was just the one table with 2 records, there's actually already a size difference at this point. And of course, the more data you put in there, then the more the larger the difference becomes. I am, with a view to the time, gonna speed up quickly to the next solution, which is OneDrive and SharePoint sync. You can actually import a file from OneDrive or SharePoint. Most of the time, you're going to probably use SharePoint and use synchronization with SharePoint. This means that you publish it once, or actually you don't necessarily publish it in the traditional sense through Power BI Desktop, but you upload it once from SharePoint, and then the Power BI service maintains that connection to the SharePoint location. And as you develop locally, you can just save it to the document library that I have here as well. You can see that this file is being saved and synced. And the Power BI service maintains that connection and will actually automatically. Probably, I think the default is sort of once an hour, and also with every dataset refresh, it'll do a refresh, and then your changes are just pushed through, which is nice because you don't have to. This gives you partial source control because you know that barring any manual interventions in the service, you have some source control to the extent that the things that are in your workspace come from this SharePoint library. And in that sense, it's also somewhat of a deployment automation solution, because once you save it, your changes to the document, to the document library, then at some point it'll get refreshed and pushed to the service automatically. So this is great, less manual labor, but you can actually still, if you're developing Power BI desktop, say, hey, I want to publish this to the service and overwrite and do stuff. So you can still break it. And also, this just means that you have a sync from sort of an offline, well, it's not offline because it's SharePoint, but external location in SharePoint to the Power BI service. But that's only from within one environment. So the document library would be your development library, and the workspace it goes to would be your development workspace. You could do more advanced things probably with Power Automate. And once you go that route, you can probably also include approvals to say, hey, I've done these changes. You're the person who asked me to do them. Please review them in this acceptance workspace and then approve that they're okay. And once you approve, that's when I'll use a flow to copy it from the acceptance document library to a production document library. And once that happens, if I have it synced, it'll automatically be pushed to the production environment. I don't think we have time to actually demo this. I can also actually, if you want, there are some excellent tutorials online on YouTube. I can actually include them in the slide deck before I share it with everyone later on. The next is file versioning in SharePoint, because you can roll back to an earlier version in the Power BI service. And for the most part, if you have your files locally, you can't do this locally either. But if you got your documents in a SharePoint or a OneDrive file system, you can actually see the version history of the file. And as you can see, I created this file 2 hours ago. It was modified 9 minutes ago. And if I want, I could actually restore the earlier version. And once I've done this, as you can see, this actually sort of restores the old version as a new version. And if I've got my documents, if I've got that file synced to the Power BI service, I will automatically, once the refresh happens, revert to the previous version in the Power BI service as well, which is great because that gives you that other component of source control, like being able to upgrade seamlessly to a new version, or revert if the situation demands it. So that's the file versioning. I've already quickly looked at how you can do this. If you have Power BI Premium in some form or another, could be Power BI Premium because you're using the embedded capacities, or because you have the dedicated premium capacity, or because you have a premium per user license, you can actually assign workspaces to a premium capacity and use the deployment pipelines that are in Power BI to migrate artifacts from through environments. And this actually gives you mostly source control, to my mind, not so much version control. I actually haven't played around with this to what extent you can actually revert to various versions of the files. So that would be interesting to look into for later. version of this presentation. What it doesn't do at present is give you insights into what exactly has changed. It'll tell you, hey, this file, this report file, or whatever file it is has changed. But that's it. It won't tell you what exactly has changed. And again, you can partially know how things get into your production environments because you can use the pipelines to push content to production, but if you've not configured your security in your production environment, then it would still be possible for people to go into the workspace in the Power BI service and publish things to it or edit them online in the service. And Power BI, the deployment pipelines do detect this, so that's great. It will tell you, hey, we've got a discrepancy. But of course, if it's at all possible, then the nicer thing would be to say, hey, no one really needs permissions in production, or except some very sort of rare cases, because we have an established flow of how things. We have a proper source control flow for how things get into production. So I think I will probably have to skip this demo because I also want to quickly call out this one. This is a solution that I wasn't aware of when I did this presentation in March for data mines. But in February, some guys over at Power BI Tips made a Power Platform solution that exactly attempts to address this problem, Power BI version control with Power Platform. How it works exactly, there's a bunch of Power Apps and flows. I haven't actually had a chance to play with it yet, but it seemed so good that I did want to put it in here so you can actually have a look at it yourself. This here on the right is actually a link to the actual blog post, and the advantage this gives you is, here we go. It's addressing a whole lot of these issues that I've also discussed. I don't think it's a complete solution. Actually, I'm not sure where it is. But they also don't think it's a complete solution. They have a bunch of stuff still on their here in limitation and scope. They have a bunch of stuff still on their backlog, and it's still in beta. But obviously, that it will get better. So I think this is really interesting and definitely something to keep an eye on. Maybe try for yourself because people have been thinking about these things and wanting to help and provide a solution for it. It's still in beta. It's not feature complete yet. And depending on how your environment is configured, you may actually need some admin or IT support when it comes to importing managed solutions into your Power Platform environment and that sort of thing. And I don't know if everyone might have the permissions to create all sorts of document libraries and whatnot. So that's going to depend on how your environment is configured. So just be aware that you might run into that. Having said that, are there any questions at this point?
Yes, Arno, we have a question from Sophie.
Yeah.
You had a nice overview of the Power BI service and all the components in it. If you you can get the slide back on the screen.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I can ask the question to you.
To see if I can go there.
So the question is, if I understood your Power BI pipeline correctly, a dashboard can exist without a report.
No. Yes. Let me just grab the slide because now I'm getting confused as well. Go back. So clicking.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yes, yeah, no, that's actually true. You can actually just create a dashboard, and the reason why is because you can also create dashboards that take visuals with visuals that take data from some streaming data sets or other
Websites,
sorts of,
for example.
yeah, exactly, just really lots of things. So there's no need to have any reports in order to be able to create a dashboard. Having said that, you do need at least one of either a dashboard or a report in order to be able to publish an app for that particular workspace. If you don't have one, you can't publish the app. And if you had one and you delete it and you figure, now I'm, for whatever reason you would want to, then you can't publish the update to the app because you need to have at least one report or one dashboard to be able to publish the app.
Yeah. Okay.
That answers the question.
And I have another question from Benny. How you would compare deployment pipelines versus rolling your own integration in Azure Devops, for example? So what's the key driver on ease of use versus the features for you?
I think this really depends on the skill set that you have. For myself and my colleagues, the deployment pipelines are really nice, but to my mind, they're not for us. We're gonna go the Azure DevOps way because we want, we've got all our environment as code, and we're really busy automating and everything as code outside of our services where we run it. And that's just not so. I mean, if you have the deployment pipelines, everything is still in the Power BI service. And of course, they're going to have good backups and everything. But still, I would prefer an option where you have all your artifacts outside the service as well, and then you can push them to the service. But I think Power BI at the moment doesn't really have an aside from sort of these building blocks that I showed, it doesn't really have any options to do that properly for people who aren't developers.
You need to have PowerShell or access to the REST API or something to
Yeah, exactly, and that doesn't really target your citizen developer or Power BI developer who just wants to do fun stuff with data. I've actually been thinking about this as well. I do think. Well, I was interested in what the guys are developing with the Power Platform solution. I think that's a really interesting way to fill that gap. Although, again, it makes you dependent on the Power Platform. I've been thinking for a while I was building this presentation about the possibility of creating an external tool that could actually do this. I do think most of the blocks are there, the building blocks to do this, and to actually maybe also do some more advanced things like showing the changes that happened between versions. But then, of course, thinking of it is one thing, and actually building it is something else entirely. So I think for the target audience of this presentation, DevOps isn't going to be feasible. Just go with the deployment pipelines or the Power Platform solution at this point, because they're the best thing there is that at this moment.
Yeah, and out of the box, that's true. It has some complications, as Benny mentioned. Data flows are not supported yet.
Yes,
Page native reports are becoming available.
Yeah.
They're working on it, so yeah, it's getting better.
Yeah, I can comment one more thing on there. I know that Mike van der Graag, another guy, as well as myself, we created packages, which are like package building blocks that you can use in Azure DevOps to configure your pipeline. For example, to create workspaces, to deploy your content and all that. Yes, there is also the same gap that we don't have a building block for data flows, but on my GitHub page is also a script to include that and add a building block for data flow movement from workspace to workspace. But there's another challenge that you will find out with data flows. A data flow always lives in the Power BI service. There's no way how a data flow can live outside of the Power BI service.
That is true. I did see a very interesting external tool that can convert your Power Query to data flow. So I guess that could be of help in that sort of scenario.
By Marcus Wegner.
Yeah, still sort of a workaround, but it works. I do think because once you get to DevOps, there's again gradations as well. Some people will completely roll their own custom solution. Other people will use the packages that you guys and other people have built. But I do think the average citizen developer also doesn't have have Azure DevOps and pipelines in there. And while it's good to learn those skills, I think it might be too daunting and intimidating for a lot of people.
Yep. So, there's one question that you raised yourself during your presentation about rollback in case you're using the native deployment pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
I answered that one. That's not possible today.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
So you're just moving content from A to B, but there's no way to revert back.
Yeah. Yeah, this is also a problem because that's what I figured. If someone does change it in production, all you can do is promote whatever is in the previous step in the acceptance workspace to production, but then you just have to hope that that was your previous production version and not a new version that's actually waiting to be accepted. Because
yeah, well, the management of permissions in all the workspaces on each of the stages becomes really important, because if by accident someone published directly into the production workspace, that might mess up with the deployment pipeline.
Yeah, and while you do see that there are differences between the pipelines, so between the stages, you don't see what is changed. So you don't see if it's the production stage that was changed or the test stage. So you'll have to find that out yourself.
Yeah. I will just quickly skip to the final slide to give you a that was a bit too enthusiastic. Anyway, at the end of the slide is at the end of the deck is a slide with a whole bunch of links to communities. Let's start from there. There you go. Paul Turley's SQL Server blog, which is really cool. A whole bunch of other ones as well, and then the Power BI blog by Microsoft and some of the communities. I would actually also be interested in more. I know there's Mark and Nikki and some other people as well to also start compiling something more of a regional list for the Netherlands and for the Benelux, basically. But there you go. Once I share the deck, you can use those links to find all sorts of new things. And having said that, I should probably stop sharing my screen so Kurt can be introduced.